They're going to continue playing with the technical things while we begin. They will continue to play them quietly, and God willing that will work, and if it won't be a great tragedy, so it'll be fine. My name is Father Bogdan Gladio. I currently am in the Ukrainian Orthodox parish of St. John in Oshawa, Ontario, and I know I've seen many of you before here, either at Christ the Savior or here at St.Sophia's. And we're going to have a talk, probably about an hour long, about internet pornography, in particular pornography in general. And before we even start, just to give credit where credit is due, a lot of what you're going to see and hear today is the result of work by Dr. Al Rossi. Now, I don't know if any of you know him, but Dr. Rossi teaches at St. Vladimir's Seminary in New York. He's a psychologist, very, very good, pious man, holy man. And I had the honor to be able to attend a talk that he gave about internet pornography in the beginning of October this past year when I was down at Holy Druid Mission Monastery in Michigan. And after that, I mean, it was very eye-opening, the kind of stuff that he was saying. So the little film, if it does in fact work, is something that he made. It's about a 6-minute little film that we'll be showing about 3/4 of the way through. It's something that he made himself. And then a lot of the notes and information are directly prepared by Dr. Rossi, plus some other things. Now, I see that I left my books over here. There are some materials that afterwards, if you're interested in learning more, you may be interested in. One is a book, I got the old version called The Drug of the New Millennium, but the actual title of the newer version is, The Drug of the New Millennium. Yeah, that's it. And by Mark Castleman. Another one by William Struthers called Wired for Intimacy. Very, very good. And I have a couple of articles here. One which I would really recommend is called Slave Master, How Pornography, Drugs, and Changes Your Brain by Daniel Hilton. And it was published in the magazine Salvo. I don't know if any of you were aware of that, but you can get it online. And then there's another one here from the Army Times about Addicted to Online Porn, which gives you some idea of the problems that the U.S. Army is having with this issue. So, we are going to begin. And so as we begin, let's just take a moment, close our eyes, have some silent prayer. Remember that Christ is here with us, and that Christ would direct everything that goes on during this next hour. And we remember that Christ is everything for this topic and for all of life. I've been a priest now almost 24 years or something, and it really freaked me out when I heard Dr. Rossi's talk, because I knew it was bad. I just wanted to do a disclaimer. No, I haven't been looking at any pornography or anything else to prepare for this. As anyone in the society, growing up and in university and things like that, you see it here and there. I mean, it's part of our life. It's all around us. So it'd be very difficult to grow up without having been exposed to pornography, especially if you ever go on a computer, okay? But, again, right off the bat, thank God, by the grace of God, I don't look at that stuff. I don't see that stuff. And so it's not a part of my life. And pastorally, you have to deal with it here and there. But to really see, and it's one of those things. Father Alexander Elcheninov, in his book Diary of a Russian Priest, he talks about how, men never confess sins against the 6th commandment, about thou shalt not commit adultery, right? It's my own personal business, Father. It's no business of yours, right? And so much more with this because it's something that brings so much shame to people. So even in confession, if people do confess, that's already usually at the point where things are really getting out of control and they need some kind of help. This is the kind of thing that doesn't get confessed much. So I was very surprised at how rampant this is. You know, it's a gigantic business. It's a gigantic industry. Okay, it's like $100 billion a year. That's internet pornography. That's more than the NBA, the NFL, and Major League Baseball combined. Okay, so why is it such a big problem? Because people could make lots and lots of money at it. Okay, so purity of heart in a sex-saturated culture. Okay, we sing at the liturgy, at the Beatitudes, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God." And we believe that if people are pure in heart, they will see, they will know God even on this earth. And that's what our salvation consists of, is knowing God. But we also know that the opposite of that is not true. You know, if you are not pure in heart, well, you're not going to see God. You know, you can't see God if you're not pure in heart. So what is purity? Well, purity, you know, sometimes you see like, you know, you see the little child and the little baby and you know they're pure, they have no sins, they're just innocent, right? Or you see a brand new white shirt with French cuffs, which is cut really nicely, right? And it's just that pure white. You see, it's, you know, it's not, there's unstained. Okay. Now we have to say off the bat that Orthodox Christianity is attractive to people. We have Father Christopher here with people from his parish, and we see how that parish has grown just in 5 years. Okay, why are people attracted to it? Because Orthodox Christianity is pure. It's attractive because it has the right Christ, both liturgically and theologically. And orthodoxy, we have to say, is sensual in its purity. That's one thing as Orthodox Christians. We just had the Sunday about the icons, right? It's all incarnational. You know, the Orthodox Church is a very sensual church, you know. And another thing about purity is people who are into purity, people who are into purity of heart, are persons of depth and identity. So what does the church say about sex? You know, because this is all directly related to sex, right? Well, first of all, we have a very positive attitude about sex. Just let me get my Bible. You know, the first commandment that we get from God to Adam and Eve is what? Be fruitful. Go forth and multiply and fill the earth, right? Okay? So, there's nothing wrong with sex. That's something that some Western Christians sort of imported. But like anything good, it can be perverted. Okay? So we don't believe that there's anything wrong with sex. And in fact, if we look at the church, right, what is the greatest example given for God's love for us? Well, it's the marital bond. You know, we read if we've been married in church, the epistle of St. Paul to the Ephesians, you know, I speak of Christ and of the church. But notwithstanding that, let the husband love his wife and let the wife fear her husband, right? Because we're talking about the relationship between Christ and the church. And that's like the marital bond. Now, if you've been going to presanctified liturgies, you've been hearing from the book of Proverbs what we read, you know? My son, hold fast to wisdom and incline your ear to my words, that you may guard good thinking. And I command you with the perception of my lips, do not join yourself to a base woman, for honey drips from the lips of a prostitute, or for a season she is pleasing to your taste. Afterward, however, you will find her more bitter than gall. And later on, drink waters from your own vessels and from the fountains of your spring. Do not let the waters from your fountain be spilled by you, but let your waters pass through your wide places. Let them be only for you, and let no stranger partake with you. Okay, so this is talking about marital fidelity. Okay, how we should be true to our spouse, how that's the proper context for that marital relationship, and we shouldn't be throwing that away. Some of you, I'm sure, have read, or heard of at least, the Song of Songs. from the Old Testament. I mean, this is the Bible. Let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth, for your love is better than wine, and the smell of your ointments is better than all spices. Your name is ointment poured forth, therefore the young maidens love you, they draw you. Okay? This is very beautiful, romantic poetry. And that's the Bible. You know, so for anybody to say that the church is against sex or anything like that is absolutely untrue. We have the stories in the New Testament of Jesus with the sinful woman. The one takes the oil of nard and anoints his head with it. I mean, you can imagine the sensuality of that. The woman that comes up and cries on his feet and wipes his feet, cleans his feet with her hair. I mean, very sensual images. Okay, so the church in itself is very sensual. You know, we have the classic old saw that the worship appeals to all the senses. You know, we hear the singing and the bells. We smell the incense. We taste the Eucharist. We touch, we kiss the icons, etc., etc. So it's very sensual. And yet, we preach purity and chastity. Okay? So, many of you, I'm sure, know, and if you don't know, you should find out, that in Greek, there were at least 4 words for love, but the 4 generally given are storgi, which is like affection, the kind of love that you might have for your dog or something, the affection. Philia, which is the friendship love, which is where we get the word like bibliophile, somebody who likes books. You have agape, which is this altruistic kind of love, self-giving love, the love that cares for the other first, which is, by the way, the word that's used in the 13th chapter of St. Paul's epistle to the first epistle to the Corinthians. You know, it's in English, Old English, charity, but it's agape. It's not romantic love. It's altruistic Christian love. So when you hear somebody having that read at their wedding ceremony, okay, generally it's misunderstood. Anyway, and then, you know, and I think that there should be a rule. That if anybody ever comes up to a priest or a minister or anybody else and says, Father, I want you to read, you know, from the 13th chapter of First Epistle of Corinthians, you know, at my wedding. That's the reading I want you to say. Okay, but we can only use the King James translation. Charity is kind. Charity is long-suffering. Charity, you know, because usually they're thinking of, you know, whatever. Anyway, the 4th word is eros, from which we get the word erotic. And eros means, nowadays, it's always, not always, but almost always, taken to mean something, you know, like with sexual overtones, right? But that's not what it is. Eros is a fiery love. St. John Climacus, again, if we're reading the latter divine ascent with the church, he talks in several places about casting out eros by eros. You know, the woman who came, the sinful woman who came and washed Jesus' feet with her tears and wiped his feet with her hair. And he says that, you know, she cast out love by love. Her love for Christ was better, more than her love for her sinful life. Okay? And so when we think about eros, it's this fiery kind of love. God has eros for us. God has erotic love for us. It's a zealous kind of all-consuming love. But we also have to say, eros without agape is just lust. So we're not talking about lust at all. And in fact, lust is the problem, which we'll see. Eros, if we think of it in this way, it's the sense of wonder or awe or delight. You know, the sense of ecstasy. You know, Christ comes, St. Paul tells us, we'll hear in a few weeks, you know, that we might have joy, okay? And that we might rejoice, okay? And so that idea of divine eros is very important. And so what we have now in our society is a society where that idea of the divine eros, of the true love, has for the most part been replaced by this false teaching, which really is nothing other than lust. Okay, it's what do you call it? Self-aggrandizement. You're doing things only for yourself. You only care about yourself, and it's been referred to regarding this whole issue of pornography as the pornification. There's a woman that actually wrote a book called The Pornification of Society, okay? What was 40 years ago, and I remember when I was a kid, you guys have seen the old James Bond movies with Sean Connery back from the 60s? I remember very well when I was maybe about 9 years old, 8, 9 years old, my parents talking about how this James Bond movie had come out. It was Goldfinger or something like that, one of the first ones, okay? And how absolutely scandalous this was. And people wouldn't go because it was just absolutely scandalous. Now you look at that stuff now, and you don't, like if they do that on a commercial, nobody would blink. But then it was like borderline pornography. Okay, and now, remember a few years ago when at the Super Bowl, I think it was Janet Jackson was there and her thing came undone, okay? Remember that? And remember what a big deal everybody made out of it? But if you were to go back and look at the commercials that were happening at that very same time on those very same stations, you would probably see stuff a lot worse.
Yeah. Father,
and nobody said anything about that.
And those commercials, many of the commercials then and even now, will sort of have a teaser that is supposed to then link you to a website that has something that would never get on television that you can then watch on the internet. Which is
okay, so really, we live in a society which has been pornified. I think that, we can say that pretty safely, okay? And then so that people ask the question, oh yeah, but is it really all that bad? I mean, really, is it all that bad? And the short answer is just yes. It is. It's that bad. It's probably worse than that bad, okay? One of the really bad things is what it does to people's relationships. And across the board. It's not just husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever. We're talking a little bit about what happened at West Point. They had to cut out all of the pornography because of what it was doing. You know how when you're a soldier, you have a buddy that looks after your back? Well, if he's really into porn, he might not be looking after your back. It's like destroying everything, okay? So it's really, extremely horrible as far as what it does to a person's ability to have healthy relationships. One thing that is said all the time is, well, how could it hurt anybody? I do this alone. I look at this stuff alone. Well, it hurts in many different ways. I mean, the actors, the people who act in the pornographic films, okay? Generally speaking, well, they're referred to as throwaway people. Virtually all of them are dead by the age of 50. A lot of them by the age of 35. And you can imagine why. It's probably not a very healthy lifestyle. There's lots of, you can imagine what goes on in people's brains, okay? Lots of drugs, lots of disease, okay? And it's just not good. So every time you look at one of those things, you're putting somebody in an early grave, okay? You have the wives, or the husbands, or the children, or the families, or the careers, or the churches of the people who become addicted. And we'll tell some stories about that later on. A nice phrase from Dr. Rossi's presentation, which really describes it well. He says, a downward helix which leads to utter darkness. That's what the pornography is. It takes away the connection between people. And like we said, it's across the board. And it's been called the cancer of commitment. The cancer of commitment. You know how we have in our society nowadays, I hear it all the time, and I'm telling you, I see it in the church, and I'm not saying everybody's doing this because it's just pornography, but people don't want to be committed to anything. Just the other day, a woman came up to me, oh, Father, don't make a schedule for the girls to come up and hold the communion cloth or anything, because, basically, we don't want to commit to anything. If we're here, we'll do it. If we're not, we won't. And you get this with the altar boys and with this and that. Everybody wants, yeah, I'll help if I can. But nobody wants to commit to anything. And like this whole issue of pornography, well, it just takes it and sends it up to the gazillionth degree. Now, one of the really big things about pornography, what makes it so alluring, is that basically there are the 4 A's, if you remember this. Number 1, it's accessible. All you need is an internet connection. You work at the library in Hamilton, right? You ever see people looking at pornography on the computers there? Yeah.
At the library?
In the library, yeah. Oh yeah. It is affordable. Again, All you need is a library card, which you can get for free. Can't get cheaper than free. It is anonymous. It's been called a stealth drug. It's anonymous. Nobody, you lock yourself in your room, nobody need know. You can, and what they call this, they call it self-medicating. Because anytime anybody has an addiction, the addiction, you know, there's a really nice phrase. They have it to fill up a hole in the soul. Something they feel is missing, and they fill it up with something else. It might be alcohol, it might be drugs, it might be sex. And so this process is often referred to as self-medicating. I feel really bad, so I'm going to do this to make me feel better. Now the problem with the addiction is that the typical pattern is you feel bad, you take the drug or take the drink or do whatever, and you feel better for a while, and then when it wears off, you feel worse than you did in the first place. So you need more and more of the stimulus to get less and less of the high. And it's just, again, it's that descending death spiral, you know? And with the anonymity, there's also one other thing, which is no physical after effects. You spend an hour looking at porn on the internet, and you're not going to stagger around, and you're not going to be, you know, out of it, and like that. You walk around normal and like that. So you've got, it's accessible, it's affordable, it's anonymous, and lastly, it is aggressive. Okay? The pornographers are predators, and they are out to get you. Okay? It's not that it's waiting there for you to come to it. They're trying to come to you. Father just mentioned this whole thing with these websites on the commercials. One thing that they will do is send out emails to people, you know? Hey, haven't heard from you for a while, you know, all this kind of stuff. And what happens often is they'll get into somebody's computer, they'll get the address list, and then you get this email from somebody you know. Now, thank God, it hasn't happened to me, because anytime I get somebody that sounds weird, I just either call them up or email them and say, did you just send me something? And so far, I haven't clicked on anything I shouldn't click on. But, you know, that's it. They're out to get you, because they, you know, they want to get you hooked. And then there's this technique they use called mouse trapping, where they send you, Lubomir, you know, I get an email from Lubomir that says, hey, look at this picture, and I click on it, and it's whatever. And then I say, oh, I don't want to see that, and I go to close it, and then it's set up so that when you close that, another one opens, and then another one opens, and another one opens. And it was really funny to hear Dr. Rossi talk about it, because he said it happened to him once. He says, whoa, 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 and then I finally just pulled the plug on the computer. Because, you know, but that's what they do. Okay, that's what they do. Yes, if you're reading the Ladder Divine Ascent, the 15th step yesterday, there's that one, I can't remember, I want to say the 71st little rung on there, but it says, you know, God has given man, the male human being, sort of the drive to pursue the female. If he had given the same type of a sex drive to the female, no flesh could be saved, right? In other words, the female is by nature more demure and more standoffish. But if the females were going around chasing the males, no one could be saved. Well, this is what we got.
That's what we live in.
This is what we got, yeah. Oh yeah, this is what we got. Okay? Now, why is it this way? Why is this way? Well, we have to talk about what pornography does to my brain. Okay? And I would really recommend, if you're interested in this, you've got these books, Wired for Intimacy by Struthers, and The Drug of the New Millennium by Castleman. They're both very, very good books. And it talks about the science behind it. Okay, it talks about the biochemistry behind it. The brain is always seeking new experiences. Okay, we thrive on novelty. And just look into your own lives. We thrive on novelty. We always want new experiences. Okay? And then with the pornography, what happens is, for various reasons, there's always an escalation of interest. You go from, you know, the soft core, which is what we definitely have on TV nowadays, softcore pornography, no question about it, to the hardcore, to violence, to child porn, to all kinds of other really degrading and horrible stuff, okay? And because of the way we're wired, you need more and more. It has to be more and more, how do you say, shocking to get that same high that we crave. What happens just, and I'm not a biologist, I'm not a neurologist, I'm not any of that, okay? The science is in the books and in other good books that you have if you really want to look at it. But basically what you're getting is shots of norepinephrine, which is adrenaline, and dopamine, and oxytocin, and serotonin, and all these chemicals. Now, if somebody has Parkinson's, for example, one of the treatments that they might get is that they will be given dopamine, right? So if the dopamine is given as a, what do you call it, a prescription to somebody who needs it, it's a drug. Well, you know what? If you're making it in your brain and it's going into your system, it's a drug just as much, and that's why we say pornography is a drug, okay? And what happens is you've got this reward center down in your brain. And when the dopamine receptors get acclimated to this level, then actually they will begin to atrophy a bit, so you need more dopamine, and it's just, again, it's this downward spiral, okay? And what you end up with, you're dealing with an older portion of your brain, a more primitive portion of your brain, and then up front, in the frontal lobes where we actually think, that's sort of the part of your brain where you control that, okay? So, if you want to think of it this way, your frontal lobes are the brakes. Back here in the brainstem, you're getting, you know, the gas put on. There we got the adrenaline and we got the dopamine and all this, and the front saying, no, 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 put on the brakes, put on the brakes. Well, when you get into this cycle, it's not just with pornography, but for the given instance, we're talking about pornography. What happens is, as you get deeper and deeper into it, the brake pads wear down, and you can't put on the brakes, and so you basically lose control. You lose control, and all kind of really bad things happen. Okay? Now, another thing that people say, well, you know, pornography, yeah, it's there, but, you know, it's a man's thing. You know, it's not really with women. Well, you know, these pornographers are really good. They know how to get everybody. And they're using science to do it, too. Because it is true that the men and the women really do have a different brain. You know, the way it works is different. Okay? The women, the two hemispheres tend to be more balanced. The men tend to be one more, I think it's the right hemisphere. Anyway, but for the men, for the purposes of pornography, it's very visual. And basically it's the men see an assembly of body parts and acts. That's what they see. That's all, just boom, right in. For the women, the pornography, like if you were to show a man and a woman a hardcore pornographic film, under most circumstances, the man would get turned on and the woman would get turned off. She would just think it's disgusting and horrible and like that. Okay? So what do? How do the women's minds work? Well, the women see not body parts, but they see relationships. And so, you know the romance novels? Okay. That's the kind of a path that they go with the women. So with the women, with the men, they're sending these images. Okay? For the women, the way they tend to get them involved is through what they call these chat rooms, where you go in and you start talking to people and getting to know each other, and then a little bit of flirtation, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of this, and then they have what they call now cybersex. You know, where people are having relationships, even, you know, meeting other people physically for sexual acts, etc. And so this is important for us to remember that it's not just men. For the men, if you will do some statistics later, but 12 to 17-year-old boys are 87% of them, 87% of 12 to 17-year-old boys are using internet pornography. With the girls, it's about 32%, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, about 32%. Okay? So it used to be, you know, what's happening is the numbers are slowly coming up on the women's side. And what's funny is, not funny, it's sad, 20 to 25-year-old women, there's a higher percentage of them using pornography than like 60 to 70-year-old men. So you have younger generations of women who are more pornified than older generations of men. Although we'll talk about older generations of men too. It's just really crazy. You know, it's just really crazy. Why is it so hard to break? Well, it's been the addiction. It's been called like a polydrug or a superdrug because of all the chemicals that, you know, sort of get made and then sent into the bloodstream by the brain, by the endocrine system. It's very difficult to break this particular addiction. Now, one of the couple of the chapters here in this particular book, he's really good. It's called How Pornography Makes Men Stupid. And how pornography makes women stupid. And what we've got to talk about, you'll see a little bit in the film, you all know what a funnel is, right? A funnel. You have this wide mouth and it narrows, right? And you pour stuff in and the narrow thing sits into this, you know, and you can fill up a bottle with it or something, right? And so this idea of having the wide mouth, what we might call the broad perspective, coming in and narrowing and narrowing and narrowing and narrowing, and then you have a small little spout, okay? And then for our purposes, if you can imagine another funnel right underneath it facing the other way, so then it opens up again. And that's sort of what the sexual act is like, okay? So you start with a wide perspective. You're like this. Everybody can see everybody, you know what's going on. And then you're focusing, 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 focusing. And for men generally, that focus becomes very, very tight. Okay? And it is said that the sexual act is the most focused human activity there is. Okay? If not the most, then pretty darn close to it. Okay? And so when we talk about that funnel, what you've got is you've got this broad perspective, you keep narrowing, 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 you get this very narrow focus, and then you're basically just, you know, like they say, a one-track mind, okay? And it's absolutely unbelievable what goes on. And I'll tell you a story from that one book. 70-year-old grandfather gets involved with internet porn. He's looking at young girls, which are usually, you know, 18-year-olds, so they're not going to get arrested, the guy's making it, who look very girlish and dress them up like in little girls' clothes, and he's looking at this kind of stuff. And he's got grandchildren. And one day he's in his room behind the locked door looking at the porn. The kids and the other grandkids are out. His 12-year-old daughter is in the house. He gets out. He's in that zone. And he sees her, and he starts coming on to her. Well, she screams and runs out of the house. Everybody comes back. They say, "What's going on?" You know, you can imagine what that did in the family. You can imagine what that did in the family. Okay? So that's that focus. How does it make you stupid? There's another story in there about a woman, a fine, upstanding woman, wife, children, active in the church, in the community, the whole thing. Okay? Starts going on the chat rooms, deeper and deeper and deeper, starts driving to the next town to have a relationship with this guy and relationship with that guy, and by the time everything is over with, what? She's divorced, living in a one-room apartment, her kids hate her, her husband hates her, boom, everything falling apart. And these are like normal, fine, upstanding people. Okay, so how does it make you stupid? Well, that's what it does. It makes you stupid. You lose the ability, that hypofrontality, when the frontal lobes begin to atrophy, and they actually do atrophy. And by the way, it happens with other types of addictions too. It happens with drug addiction, it happens with alcohol, it happens with obesity. Okay, food addictions. Okay? The good news is that it can be reversed, at least with the research with the food addictions and with the alcohol addictions, I believe, shows that it can be reversed. Okay, so you can actually, it can, you know, you can get your wits back. Okay, but it does make you stupid. Okay. Now, as we said earlier, it is a big business. You know, we mentioned, you know, $100 billion a year. And those statistics like 2-3 years old. And reading some of the stuff from earlier, it's been growing like astronomically. It's unbelievable. The kind of stuff that they do, you'll get free material. You can go on the web and just within 2-3 clicks, you got what you want, and they'll give you the free material. So that you have to, because remember how it works. You need to escalate it. You need more to get the same response. So finally, you know, you end up on more and more of the hardcore sites. They will purposely misspell domain names. So if you get, and I'm not going to say any of the names, if you get, especially with young people, like sites that young people will go on, they'll take a common misspelling of that particular word or thing. So you misspell it, www. One letter wrong. Well, you end up with, you know what, and then people get hooked. Because remember, when we're younger, especially when we're, you know, in our early teens, adolescence, you know, we don't have experience. How do you know how to deal with this? Your grandmother never told you. I hope she didn't. I hope she doesn't know about it. But you know what? We're going to have to tell our grandkids about it. Okay? And one more thing before we look at the film. There was an outright lie perpetrated back in 1969 that was finally refuted in 1977, but you may still have heard it, because this is another thing that is said. In Denmark in 1969, they opened up the laws on pornography because they said, oh, you know, if men are able to look at pornography, the level of sex crimes will come down because they'll have, you know, a quote-unquote healthy outlet. Okay? And supposedly it did. Until somebody from the World Health Organization or Interpol or somebody actually went in and checked the statistics. And that happened in 1977, where it was proven that actually the level of sex crimes went up. And wherever that has happened, wherever you've had the, loosening of the pornography laws, sex-related crimes and violence have increased rather than decreased. You know, you have all of these things which are often portrayed in pornographic films, like what is called commonly the rape myth, that women want to be treated violently and want to be dominated and things like this, you know. The fact of the matter is that in the vast, vast, vast majority of the cases, if you were to go to a prison where you've got 100 guys who are incarcerated for rape or molestation or some kind of sex crime, and you were to say, you know, what percentage of them used pornography? If it's not 100%, it would be 99. It's very rare you find somebody who's committed a sex crime who is not into pornography. You just look behind, you know, whenever you get some of these, you know, serial rapists and serial killers and things like that, you look at their life, what was happening. You guys remember who Ted Bundy was? Mm-hmm. Man, he himself said that it all started when he was a kid and got hold of a Playboy magazine. And that's what turned him into the monster. Okay? So that is very, very important to remember. It is not something which is benign. It is something that's very, very dangerous, and we have to accept that. Now, before we look at the film, one of the pieces of information that I got my hands on, actually one of my women from my parish had sent it to me about a year ago. She's from Romania. She has a degree in social work, so she was doing some research on pornography, and it was a report to the United States Senate in 2005. And so they go through all of the statistics, all of the information, everything else, and you get to page 52 at the very end. And I think this just says it all. Page 52, contrary findings. Quote, in an attempt to present key findings in a fair manner, data regarding the benign and or positive impact of internet pornography on marriage and family were sought. While research exists to support children, adolescents, and adults having access to the internet, no studies could be found regarding the positive impact of internet pornography specifically. Okay? So this is like some gigantic, really, if you know what I mean, dense academic stuff. They could not find any scientific evidence to indicate that there was any positive impact at all from the use of internet pornography. So, can we roll the film? And can we stop it here and there along the way? Is that possible? So in a marriage, the sexual activity brings you closer to each other, and you're done, and you're there with each other, okay? And it unifies you. When there ain't anybody else there, because first of all, people know that the pornography is not, let us say, optimal. So very often, the vast majority of people are ashamed of it. So they go into that funnel, and when they come out, all that's there is shame. So sometimes often what happens is, how do you get rid of that shame? Well, I'm going to do it again so I can get into that funnel, forget about everything, right? Okay? So it's a really, this is a really good image to keep in mind. You know, in a marriage, it's beautiful. But when you're alone, you know, it can really destroy a person. Okay? So anyway, go ahead. It would be that, you know, the old Latin proverb, corruptio optima pessima, the corruption of the best is the worst, right? So why do people get so upset about the Roman Catholic priest molesting the boys? Well, they should be held to a higher standard. We should, okay? So, if there is a devil, and we believe there is, you know who the devil's going to go after first. So that's one thing. The second thing is, I think really you're going to have more temptation. Not just from the, you know, you want to look at the devil trying to pull somebody down, but you're just going to have more temptation because you're involved with people intimately. I had 5 people to confession on Friday night between 3:30 and 6:30 p.m. You're involved intimately in people's lives. So you have to be very careful with all that stuff. And there really is something where when a person is authentic, when they are God-sourced and God-directed, where they become attractive. It does happen.
Well, and I would say that's not simply, I mean, it's clearly in terms of leadership within the church and ministry in that sense, but I would say as people are more integrated in the Christian life, in the Christian community, there's more intimacy, as there should be. But then that means the temptation will increase as well for everyone in that regard.
Okay. Anyway, go ahead. Yeah, what Father had mentioned about that book, Steps of Transformation, is Father Meletius Weber. And by the way, if you have internet access, there are good things to do on the internet. One of them is to go to Ancient Faith Radio, www.ancientfaith.com, and they have podcasts. And one series of podcasts is by Father Meletius Weber, who's actually just done a really good one on the other one about the church where they've been interviewing the bishops. I can't remember the name of that, but it's a special one. Anyway, Father Meletius is there, and they also he has an excellent podcast with Steve the Builder, a 3-parter. The other, now Dr. Rossi has a podcast, and he actually has a 2-part series on internet pornography there as well, and it's called
Healing Presence.
Becoming a Healing Presence. So those would be really good things for all of us to listen to. Getting out of the addiction, okay? As you saw, you know, internet pornography is undoubtedly the fastest growing addiction that we have today. You know how it is with the alcoholics. You know, there are people who can have one drink a day, never get drunk, but they're still an alcoholic. Okay? And it's the same thing with this. You may have people who are totally debilitated and people who just seem to be going along fine. But one way or the other, remember what it said on the film here, that anybody who's looking at it and doesn't want to could have a problem. Okay? And so you have the Sexaholics Anonymous, SA, which you can find online. Easy to find, just Google it. Then you have this program, Covenant Eyes. And Covenant Eyes, how it works is every week, a person who you trust, and it's very important, you need to have people who you trust in your life, who you can open your soul to. That might be a confessor, that might be a spiritual father, that might be a spiritual mother, that might be a friend, might be a priest, whoever. But you need to have people who you can open your heart to. And so you have somebody you trust. When you sign up for that program, every week, they will get a readout of what websites you visited. And anything that is, as my daughter would say, sketchy, will be highlighted. Okay? And what it has to do with is accountability. Okay? We need to be accountable to somebody. Okay? And it's what Father was saying about that book, Steps of Transformation. Those two guys that started the AA movement, the 12-step program, they were serious Anglicans. This was in the 1930s in England, when the Anglican Church was still, there were still great hopes that it would be united with the Orthodox Church. Okay? And so they were very serious, and they knew about confession, and they knew about the whole, you know, process with opening one's thoughts and etc. These are the 12 steps as originally published by Alcoholics Anonymous. Number 1, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. Number 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Number 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. Now, we just take it and change the changeables. We admitted we were powerless over lust, that our lives had become unmanageable. Came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. Okay? This type of program is generally called something akin to spiritual surrender. We just have to realize we can't do it. And then ask God's help to do it, with the help of God and good sponsor and good friends and people who will support us. So that is the end of the presentation. If you have any questions or would like to discuss, no, I'm sorry, it's not end. I have one more story to tell you, just to give you an idea of the strength of this addiction. And it's a story I heard right in this very church upstairs after my last talk here. A woman told me, who's a social worker, we were talking about this, just two of us upstairs. She told me she's a social worker and that how important, you know, this topic is to deal with. She said just the week before, she had a woman who's on social assistance come to her, one of her people she looks after, needing money because her husband had taken the money that she had set aside to buy formula for the child, for the baby, to go buy porn videos. And he's got hundreds and hundreds of porn videos and has to get more. Remember where we talked more about escalation? And had to get more. And he was literally taking the formula out of his baby's mouth to look at porn videos. Now, listen, if there ain't a problem there, there ain't a problem anywhere. So, yeah, it can be very big. And it might not be me, but it might be my friend or my relative or somebody else. And be assured, every one of us knows people who have an issue with pornography in general and internet porn in particular. And so, even if it doesn't affect you, and God willing it doesn't, the day may come when you may need to tell somebody about SA or Covenant Eyes, or be that friend who's going to get that list of websites, okay? Because literally people ruin their lives, they ruin their family's life, they ruin everything, okay? And we don't want that for anybody. Because ultimately, it's not about lust, ultimately, it's about love, and leaving aside everything else. You cannot be a Christian and do this stuff. You just cannot, because your relationship with God, just like your relationship with your wife or your child or whatever, is totally destroyed by the pornography. So, yeah, it's that bad, but there is help and there is hope, and you know, as long as we know about it, there's always something that we can do about it. Okay. So, if anybody has any questions or whatever, please.
I have a comment. We've been struggling here with, one of my sons is in public high school, and there's a big problem with, I would say, soft porn in the high schools. They are showing movies that I would consider soft porn. And we're having we don't have the same language when we're talking to them. First of all, the parents are not informed what they're showing. So a lot of parents don't know what's being shown. So we've kind of happened upon it because we're really involved. By God's grace, we found out. And that's where it starts, really. And you're dealing with a generation of teachers that we're not speaking the same language. And so we're trying to think of a kind of a secular, approach. For example, I read an article the other day that teenagers who watch a lot of movies with alcoholism tend to drink more or whatever. So
yeah, you model behavior and they do it.
And
yeah.
I'm disgusted because we can't even communicate.
Yeah.
I don't know what.
I would recommend this article, this Slave Master article.
Yeah.
And give it to some of those teachers and say, listen, please read that, I want to talk to you about it. Or give it to the principal, say, please read it, I want to talk to you about it.
And it really is subject to the principal, because one principal who left said certainly items or movies like this with this kind of nature the parents should be alerted. And he was about the only one that agreed with that. No one else said, you know what we were told? Nobody else has complained before. You're desensitizing them in a highly sexualized environment. The kids are very, they're, not modestly dressed, whatever. They're seeing enough outside of school, and now they're being plopped in this classroom. And every class, English, history, band, everything has a movie of this nature.
Yeah.
And it's just, we're just sickened.
And to just show how there's no way out. I've become convinced that if it's possible, when I have grandchildren, if my kids aren't going to homeschool their kids,
Yeah.
and if they don't have the money to send them to a private Christian school, I'll spend the money to send them there if I can. But that doesn't protect them from all those kids that are seeing those movies now who are going to be on the street and who are,
But even
so you can't get away from it.
But the thing is too, I was talking to like a Baptist youth leader, and he said, you know how many kids have told me they watch porn? So
Yeah. So you know
and when you're seeing that, I mean, it's everywhere. It's on, every device has internet connectivity.
Yeah.
Every kid knows how to hack everything. It's just,
So,
it's just so frustrating. And when you have the education system saying, my husband went to talk to the vice principal, honestly, he said he did not understand what I was saying. They were speaking a different language.
So,
How do you-
honestly, listen, the story about hockey on
And
Sunday.
I homeschool, but my son insisted
The
on
story
going to
about
school, so
hockey on
it's-
Sunday. The story about hockey on Sunday. And I can't remember exactly where it was. It was somewhere, I believe, around Chicago, where this was, it was ages ago. It was maybe like, 15, 20 years ago, where they wanted to have hockey for the kids on Sunday like they have here, right?
Mhm.
And all of the Christian pastors and everybody got together and said, no. And they told the people, your kid isn't going to play hockey on Sunday. And all the people themselves, nobody showed up for hockey, so they had to cancel it. And that's honestly the only way anything works here.
And you know what?
Because
I think
now
we've become
you
apathetic.
elect,
Yeah, I don't
you
know.
elect your, well, you know what's going on in the public schools here right now with this Bill 13.
Yes.
Yes, and there's
Okay.
this. I mean, it's
Okay.
you're
So,
rebattling other things.
unless you elect a representative, and that representative really has the say, and unless you get a gazillion people
They're
on...
not even telling the parents. Yeah.
Exactly, well, of course.
Because they don't see it as wrong.
You're the first person who's complained. That's what we hear.
Yeah. So then, and I'm very, how to put it, I'm ashamed to say this. yeah, you need to do all this grassroots kind of stuff, and I'm really not that involved in it. I just don't have time.
We have a lot of Orthodox
But, you
Christians who are
know-
very apathetic too, because my son
Yeah.
is saying, to,
Oh, yeah.
well, there's all those other Orthodox Christian kids, they're doing this and they're doing that, and you know, we hear this,
Yeah.
and it's just so,
So I think that really the only way it
It's
works
just-
in a
it's
democratic, pluralistic, multicultural society is that you need to make a big, 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 big noise. Because ultimately, people will only do something if it's easier for them to do it than it is to not do it. Right now, it's easier for them to put on a movie and let the kids sit there and
yeah, it's ridiculous.
go into that
yeah.
funnel, right?
Not only that, one of the teachers actually told my son the last day, because she knew we were poets, said, she kind of asked him, what do you want to do, stay and watch the movie or go into the pod, you know, she was trying, because she knew she wasn't supposed to showing it, and he kind of said, oh, I'll stay and watch, he didn't even know what he was watching, he came home, he was kind of horrified actually, and she had told him, I don't want to get a call from home, she basically told him not to tell us. Because now, in Waterloo, the new words are co-parenting. That's what they think they're doing, they're co-parenting. These are the words
You
have
know
been
what?
used.
It's the Soviet Union all over.
It's
I'm
sick.
sorry, but we live
No,
in
it
the
is the Soviet Union.
No, we
yeah,
do.
except
We
nobody's
do.
aware of it. That's the only problem. Then they made
Yeah.
the world aware of it.
Yeah.
They're co-parenting.
I think that I mean, with all of this that we're talking about, I think it is important to be informed, to be aware, but it's important to, I think, do everything that we can to be living a life of repentance ourselves, and in doing this, by our own repentance, calling all of our children, our friends, our family, the other members of our churches, to that life of repentance as well. I think it's as we seek to have pure hearts that it will matter what evil goes on in the world. I mean, we will suffer for it. I don't deny that. We will, and of course that's Soviet Union is a wonderful example. Is an example of the suffering that will come, and is already upon us, I think. But I think it comes down to our really seeking that purity of heart ourselves, that wholeness of heart, and that we instill that in our children. We give it to our children as a precious gift, but the only way we can give that to them is as we seek to have that ourselves.
Amen. Yeah, because you know that's I think one thing that we do have going for us is you can't fool a kid.
No.
The kid knows what's good and bad and right and wrong and who loves them and who doesn't and who's trying to use them and all that kind of stuff. And so if they do see those examples, like Father says, in us, you know, they're going to get hooked by the sensational and all that kind of stuff. But you can't build anything on that. Ultimately, you can't build anything on that. But you know what? I'm convinced more and more that the job of the church now, more and more, is simply to try to salvage what's left of broken lives.
Yeah.
As far as really trying to make a Christian society, there is no such Christian society at all. And I'll tell you what, and the people who think they have one, like a lot of these evangelical types, God bless the evangelicals, but there's a lot of people there, like, you know, you get it in the religious right in America a lot. You know, the city set on the hill, that's a big tradition in the United States, not so much here. But I think, and that's just absolutely not there. You know, because you look at, just to look at the, how do you say, you look at the outcome statistics of how many of those kids in that particular type of society are having abortions and premarital sex and all this kind of stuff. You know, and it's like the whole thing here with the Catholic schools. We have no Catholic schools in Ontario, by the way, you know that.
Yeah.
There's no such
We're
thing as a
just paying
Catholic
for
school.
schools.
No, and I'm serious. Because the separate school board is under the administration of the Ministry of Education, and the Catholic bishops do not have any word to say. They are consulted, but they're only a consulting body. So the ministry does what it wants, no matter what the Catholic bishops say. It is not under the Catholic Church, it's not under the bishops. So, you know, anyway, go ahead.
Being from a generation next to everybody that has sort of commented, and with all respect to you and the doctor and everybody else, I think just a bit of background. So I grew up in the wonderful so-called Yugoslavia, and which had, you know, the communist satanic manifestation across the whole society. So I remember being about maybe 5 years old, and it's a party, my parents are making a party, and our
It's not the whole story. Because, are you familiar with the term sexting?
Oh,
Are
okay.
you familiar with that? No, seriously. Okay, you know, but people take take a picture of myself naked, send it to somebody and this and that. That's not prostitution. You get the child, you know, it's horrible. You get the child pornography, where they're abusing kids, and they're taking, it's not prostitution. You know, so yeah, that's a part of it. I have no question with you about that. But you know what? It's gone so far past that, with these sex rooms and the chat rooms and all that kind of stuff, you know, that they're doing. It's gone so far past that, that people are prostitutes and you don't have to pay them. You know, so yeah, I don't disagree with you one bit, but you know, it's gone so far past that, that it's just crazy.
I think that the word that the fathers use is porneia,
Yeah.
right? And so I mean, it's just, I think it's any way in which lust and I mean the kind of parts of the brain you're talking about, you know, that this takes hold of us, that this passion takes hold of us, and I think that this is the real. I mean, the fathers, you can go all the way back to where you can go back into the Old Testament, where this is something that has been a part of the human brokenness from the beginning. The difference now is that the images and the ideas and everything related to it is everywhere now, and that it is so in that sense, and so the addiction to it. I mean, it's like the idea of to be addicted to alcohol. I mean, if there's not a lot of alcohol around, then you know that's not the issue isn't going to be so prevalent. You go to places where alcoholism is rampant, and it's because people are making alcohol whatever they can make it out of, right? And so, but now with this being everywhere, I think this is why it is such a great disease, such a great scourge on our age.
Being from the same country as my brother Milos, I can say that I stepped in the church when I was in my mid-20s, so I was under heavy influence of pornography.
Yeah.
From this point, I can say that it's absolutely impossible to fight pornography unless we know who is behind it. And fathers clearly said it's a demon. Once when we have this information, it's a demon, now you have somebody to fight against, not some imaginary pornographers over there that are dangerous. It's not just a pornographer, it's a very dangerous beast called demon. And the fathers wrote a lot about it, especially St. John Climacus that you mentioned in his letter of divine assent. And I can also say that it's impossible to fight it with any other template unless what the church gave us. And those are holy sacraments. Without confession, without taking Holy Communion, without repentance, you can't fight it. You are so heavily bombarded. When I was driving here to this church, it's St. Patrick's Day, and I see naked girls all over the place. You can't, I'm looking in front of me and she's crossing the road. I see naked women. So how can I fight it? Only if I receive Holy Communion regularly, if I'm trying to live in repentance, that's the only way. There's no other template.
And that's very, very important, because it's not just fighting what is now, not just not looking at the billboard or whatever, but it's also all those memories we have. Those memories affect us. And once it comes in, and you know what? And it's just, you know, like you say, you just turn to God, you flee to God, you know, Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy on me, and you just have to learn to deal with those thoughts, just to leave them behind you. You confess them, you dump them, you let God deal with them, you let the Holy Communion burn them out of you, and when it comes back, you know who it's coming from. Say, okay, devil, you're just doing your job, that's okay. Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy on, you know, like that. Yeah, it's very important. I don't want to minimize these, either this Covenantized though, or the SA program, because for a lot of people,
It doesn't come quickly, it's a long
exactly.
battle.
But like I say,
Yes.
those programs, without what you're talking about, you're looking for a secular solution to a spiritual problem. You know. So, anyway, please.
When you were talking about soft pornography, were you referring to something like that picture of the woman in that pose with the man? Or
No,
is
I'm
that...
talking about already when people are let us say, in their birthday suits, but not really doing anything, something like to that point, okay? Something like, I'm told you can see now in soap operas and things like that, you know, so, I don't know. I don't watch TV anymore.
I have a question a little bit different. It's
Okay,
about
please.
homosexual.
Yeah.
Because
So, one thing you said, and I don't want to misquote you, so please, if I recall correctly, and if I'm wrong, correct me, but you said something that, so the church doesn't accept people like that. You said
Well,
something to that effect,
that's
okay?
what I-
And I would like to start there, because that's absolutely not true. That's often the impression given. And if you take certain Protestant types of people, certain types of Protestant people, I should say, and even you'll find in the Orthodox Church probably, who will say, oh, you know, they're evil and they're this and they're that, and talking in general. Well, we don't talk like that about anybody. That's just wrong. And that's not what Jesus says. Jesus says you love everybody. So it doesn't matter. So the first point I would make is what they now call the sexual orientation. What sexual orientation anybody is absolutely immaterial to anything. Okay? In that sense. In the sense of Christian, godlike, agape love. Right? So that's, and Father, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's the way I believe the teaching of the church is. Okay? That's number one. Number two, this whole thing of what they call the same-sex attraction. Okay? First of all, we have to say it functions differently for women and for men. Remember we talked earlier about how the women and the men's brains work differently? It functions differently. It's almost like two different things. Same-sex attraction in a woman is very different from same-sex attraction for a man. Okay? What's common is they're attracted to people of the same sex, but how it actually works itself out, how it plays out, how it works. For example, with women, there's the tendency that they're going to nest and it's two and it's a very close relationship, right? Whereas with men, sexually, to have a male person with same-sex attraction who is faithful to their spouse sexually, or to their partner sexually, is virtually impossible. They need to go out and have sexual encounters with all kinds of other people. No, I'm just talking generally. I'm not talking about him, I'm talking generally. That's, you know, so you see those types of manifestations, okay? Now, when we talk about people as individuals, okay, what you can say is, what you can say is that everybody has their own experience, right? You will find, for example, again, to go to the general, many times when boys are sexually molested as children, they will, later in life, I don't know how to say it, they will manifest same-sex attraction. That will often happen, okay? Now, you have people like you talk about your friend who say, from when I was 9 years old, I knew that I'm attracted to people of the same...
He was very confused
Yeah.
because he didn't
Yeah.
understand that.
Yeah, exactly.
And his parents very normal people,
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
humble, very working.
Yeah.
And you know, he has a
Yeah.
sister,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
absolutely normal woman,
Yeah.
has a family and everything. But from childhood, he said,
Yeah.
like even when girls
Yeah.
pay attention to
Yeah.
him, he was freaking out
Yeah. So,
right away.
so anyway, the point is that that happens. That's just part of life. Okay, that happens. Where we draw the line, where we say that the issue is important for the salvation of our souls, really has nothing to do with whether I'm attracted to a man or attracted to a woman. What it has to do with is what is the proper context for sexual activity. And from the standpoint of the church, from the Old Testament times yet, the proper context for manifesting human sexual genital behavior is in the context of a consecrated marriage between a man and a woman. Okay? That's what the church teaches. So in this sense, what we would say is whether someone is same-sex attracted and acting out sexually with someone of the same sex, or whether they are heterosexually attracted and acting out with somebody of the opposite sex, if they are not in a committed, blessed marriage while they're doing it, it's a sin.
Well, they're even acting out, whether it's with a person or even
Yeah, yeah,
virtually, like
exactly,
we've been
yeah.
talking about in terms of
Yeah,
pornography
yeah.
and,
Yeah.
and so having
Now,
sex with yourself.
The level of culpability can vary greatly, you know, and even in the fathers and in the canons, it speaks much differently about, you know, a 14-year-old boy who's doesn't know any better and is acting out on his own, and a man who's, you know, and a priest who's having an adulterous relationship. Well, it's a lot harder on that priest, believe me, okay? So that's really what it's about. So for us, from the standpoint of the church, all we would talk about, the central issue, so to speak, is a person manifesting their sexual activity in the proper context. Okay? And now you come to the hard question. You say, okay, well, you know, why can't the man and the man or the woman and the woman, and they're nice people. And I have no problem. Listen, I know people who are same-sex attracted, very nice people, good people, everything else. Okay? And I know people who are heterosexually attracted, and nice people and good people and everything else. We make a big, remember when, in the film, when Dr. Rossi, he has that little thing there about Johnny Cash? Ring of Fire, mixing lust with love? And that's really the issue, you know. Do human beings need to, how do you say, to, oh, what's it? I don't want to use the word acting out. But do you need to have sex to live, basically? The answer is no. That's not a need. And I got to tell you, though, it's really funny. Your sister, she had a paper to do for the nursing program. She's doing it. She's looking after elderly people in the hospital. Okay, and she gave me this paper to edit. And she's going from her textbook that people have fundamental needs. You need to eat. You need to have like a roof over your head, whatever. And one of the needs there is basically for sexual gratification. So she's talking about her patient that she's looking after, and I made sure that, you know, they were comfortable and they had to eat and this, and I said to her, well, you know, Tanya, you know, I think you should put in there. And I asked her if she wanted, what kind of sexual partner she wanted as well, you know? Because, and you know, she told me, she said, well, you know, the teacher says we have to do that. And it's all this political correct stuff, right? Okay? You know, you don't need to have sex to be a human being. As a species, that's a different thing. But personally, we have people who are, who have never had any sexual activity from their whole life. We have monks and nuns and people who aren't monks and nuns who live that way. They live a celibate life.
They're very sexual beings. That doesn't mean they're not a sexual being. I think that there's
Yeah.
a sort of this idea that, okay, well, turn off your sexuality
No,
or
you
something like
can't.
that. And that's not what's going on there. These are people who have I think, offered their life in ways that all of us are called to.
Yeah, but the point here is that you don't need to have sex to have a good, fulfilling human life. Okay, that's just a fact. Okay, now what you get with and I'm going to tell you about the argument that often is given, which I think is a specious argument, but it's up for you to decide. When they talk about the same-sex attracted people, they talk about it not in terms of human sexuality. They talk about it in terms of human rights. And if you look at the arguments that are offered, that's what happens all the time. So the argument that will be made is, well, they're nice people, they're just like me, so why can't they get married? And then we get into an argument about, okay, well, what is marriage? And unfortunately, most people, and especially people who are in politics, it seems, either don't or can't think critically anymore. Okay, it's all just what the traffic will bear and whatever they want. So that's where you get into all of those questions. But I would just very, very quickly say two things to watch out for. One is not to buy into these very simplistic and really stupid statements that some people calling themselves Christians make, that all these homosexuals are going to hell. Okay, we don't believe that. We just don't believe that. But secondly, not to lose sight of the fact that the Jews and the Christians from day one have had a very cogent and cohesive understanding of the purpose of human sexuality. And that human sexuality should be made manifest in a very particular context. Okay? So I think those are the two things that really need to be kept in mind. And everything else is a matter for discussion and understanding. But like I say, to dismiss anyone for any reason, you don't do that. You know? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
I also kind of edit the thing, I think, about when like all this thing happen, when people cheat on each other or get attracted to somebody else, I always tell to my friends or my partner that main thing why you don't do this, you hurt other person, you hurt your partner, and you always can project this yourself in the position of the person which can hurt and have a trust.
But you know what's interesting? You're right. But you know what's really interesting about that? Try to look at it from the other side. And if you do, just think of the Ten Commandments. Okay?
Yeah.
If you look at it not in terms of God making the rules and me following the rules, but if you look at it in terms of, if I don't follow the rules, what happens? I destroy relationships. What? I destroy relationships. So you're talking about putting yourself in the other place? Hurting people? Well, the fact of the matter is, God's law is just like the laws of physics. You know? It's just like the laws of physics. If you don't follow God's law, somebody's going to get hurt. And so we don't look at it legalistically, but it's just God saying, this is the way the universe works. And if you want to have a good life and get along with people and be fulfilled and be happy, this is the way you live. And when we don't live that way, what happens? People get hurt. It's amazing. Yeah, you're right. It's amazing. Please.
I have something to say regarding, related to your quote, because pornography, as my brother over here said, is related to, we have to realize that it's from the evil person. And
a transformation. There's these books which are much more technical and practical, because, you know, you can talk about the gospel all you want, which is good, and we should read it all the time and know it very well. Okay, we should swim in the scriptures. But when people are addicted, they are those drugs going around in their brain. And you do need, you know, you break your leg, you go to a doctor. And you do need the secular learning as well as the spiritual learning in order to help people in this life. And so we should not look down on any opportunity we have to try to battle these evil forces. Okay?
Just a quick question. When we were watching the slideshow, I think it said lust is like anger. or
Okay,
something
then
like
St. Maximus Confessor says that lust and anger are related, and it is true. That's why, you know, you often have the case where a girl will be raped and then killed. Okay? That we lust with our eyes, and then we get angry with ourselves because we don't want to do it, but we keep, you know, it's that death spiral. You know what a death spiral is? You remember John F. Kennedy Jr. when he died, the plane crashed? And he died because he got his plane into a death spiral. And what happens is, you're flying your plane, and you know that little plane there that shows you if you're flying level or not? Well, he was in cloud, so he couldn't see, so he had to fly on instruments. And if you can't see, your feelings might not be right. You might feel you're level, but you're not. And so you have to look at that little plane to make sure that you're level. Because if you're not, if your one wing is dipping a little bit, what's going to happen is you're going to go like this, and you feel you're level, but you're actually going down, and it becomes like a little corkscrew. It goes boom, 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 and you're dead. And that's the death spiral. And so that's where, you know, yeah, it's good to know the gospel and know the scripture and pray and do all of that stuff. But as you mentioned, we can all be deceived. Every single one of us can think we're righteous when we're not. Happens all the time. Maybe it's happening to me right now, I don't know. Okay? And so that's why it's important to have other people in your life. Other people in your life who you can turn to, who you can trust, who can, watch out for you, help you, etc. Because you don't want to get into that death spiral. It's like when you get, if any of you, if you're not married and you do get married, the day will come someday when your wife or husband, you'll think everything's going swimmingly, and your wife or your husband will very nicely and very bluntly let you know that no, it ain't. Because we don't have perspective on ourselves, and that's why it's important to have good husband, good wife, good children, good parents, good friends, good fellow parishioners, good priest, good teachers, good students, okay? Because we do have to support each other. One of my favorite quotes. Galatians chapter 6, verse 2. Bear one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ. Yeah. Okay, anything else? Nope? Okay, well, thank you for coming. You've been a very, very good bunch of people. You haven't made my life too miserable. So maybe someday I'll come back and see you all again, okay? So thank you. God bless you.